Best ever listeners, how you doing? Welcome to the best real estate investing advice ever show. I'm Joe Fairless. This is the world's longest running daily real estate investing podcast. We only talk about the best advice ever. We don't get into any of that fluffy stuff. We don't like that fluffy stuff. We're straight to the point. Help you get actionable information so you can do better or take it to another level in your real estate endeavors. We got Follow Along Friday today. Theo Hicks is with us. Today we are going to be answering multiple questions from listeners, and we got some updates too. And again, it's updates about what we're doing, but most importantly, observations we've had from what we're doing so that we can help you apply these observations to what you're doing. This is all about you, listeners. This is all about helping you out. So how do we want to kick it off?
So let's just jump right into the listener question. So this was a series of questions submitted by Stephen. And there were questions surrounding how to structure syndication deals with your passive investors. So I'm going to just kind of read through each of his questions, and we will stop and answer each one as we go by. So his message was, I was curious about syndication deal structure. I'm curious what types of deal structures are typical as far as preferred return versus equity split. So he gave an example, and I'll stop after this next sentence. For instance, if you offer a 6% preferred return, what kind of equity split is reasonable? How does that split change if you move to an 8% preferred return?
I would say there's no concrete answer to this, and I'm all about direct answers when direct answers are able to be given, because I don't like ambiguity when someone asks a question. When I ask a question, I don't like it if after they respond to the question, I still don't know the answer. Otherwise, what's the whole point of why we went to back and forth? That being said, there's no one concrete way you can structure deals. I can tell you we structure our deals with an 8% preferred return and a 70-30 split. And we might have a performance hurdle. We usually have a performance hurdle now. Once a certain internal rate of return is achieved by the limited partner, then it splits. Then every dollar of profit after that is split 50-50. When we started out, we did not have that hurdle. Now we do, based on we've got more a longer track record, more of a performance history. So now we have that performance hurdle. So we do 70-30 deals with an 8% preferred return. I have seen, and so the thought process, in my opinion, to take on this is you got a couple things to balance. One is the deal itself and what makes the most sense for the deal. And then two is being consistent with your investors so that they know what to expect from your deals. So we choose to only do deals where it makes sense to do a 70-30 split and an 8% preferred return. I have seen others who do deals that are 80-10, so 80% to limited partners, or excuse me, 80-20 to limited partners, 20% to general partners, and even 85-15 limited to general, and even 90-10 limited to general. And on the surface, that is more favorable to the limited partners. But I would argue there are two considerations to keep in mind when the deal is heavily weighted towards the limited partners in terms of ownership. One consideration is if the projected returns need to, if that structure, the 90-10 or the 85-15 or even the 80-20 needs to be in place in order for the projected returns for the limited partners to look desirable, then that's a thinner deal. I'm not saying that's always the case for that type of structure. It could be very well just a very favorable structure to the limited partner. But if in order to achieve a desired return to the limited partners, the general partner needs to structure it so that the limited partners get more ownership, then that leads me to believe that there's less wiggle room in those assumptions. Therefore, even though the limited partners get more of the share of the profits, in total, it's a thinner deal. Therefore, the profit margins aren't as projected to be as great as if it was a 70-30 deal or even a 50-50 deal. So that's one consideration. The second consideration is when it's a 80-20 deal or a 85-15 or a 90-10. Well, when something challenging takes place in that deal, if I'm a limited partner, which I am a limited partner on deals as well, including my own, I invest at least $100,000 in every one of our deals now. If I'm a limited partner on the deal, well, I want the general partners to have significant ownership in the deal so that they care about the results. And so I want them to have not only their money in the deal, which they definitely should, regardless of the structure, but I want them to have significant upside for performing and hitting the projections and even exceeding the projections that were outlined whenever I decided to invest in the deal. So there are some considerations to look at both, and this I believe is helpful for both limited partners, passive investors as you're looking at opportunities, but also answering your question. Additionally, I have interviewed people who have a structure where they bring on debt, basically just debt investors. And the difference between debt investor and equity investor: debt investor, you're capped out at a certain percent. Equity investor, you enjoy the upside. Our investors are equity investors, but we also have the preferred return. So it's a quasi debt investment because they are first in line to receive a certain percent on their investment. It's no guarantee of a return, but they're in line to receive a certain percent. In this case, in our case, it's 8% because we do 8% preferred return. But I've interviewed some people who do 6% return, preferred return, and then up to an additional 6% on their money. So they're capped out at 12%, and the general partner receives the rest whenever you sell. Additionally, a major consideration as a general partner when you're structuring deals is when you refinance the deal, are you going to keep your investors in the deal? Or are you going to, based on the amount you return on the refinance, decrease their ownership proportionate to whatever you returned? And therefore, you're gaining more ownership in the deal, and they're decreasing their ownership level because they have less money in the deal. To date, all of Ashcroft deals are my company with Frank. We do not decrease the ownership of our investors whenever we do a refinance or we do a supplemental loan. They maintain the same ownership level. So it's very desirable for the limited partners, based on how we're structuring these deals, at least how we structure our deals, because they're able to get proceeds from a refi or a supplemental loan, and they maintain the same ownership level. They're not getting purchased out of the deal. And that's not the most lucrative way for me as a general partner to structure the deal, but that's how we choose to structure it, because I believe that as our investors do well on the deals, then we'll grow organically through word of mouth, which is one of the top 3 ways that we get new investors coming in: word of mouth, bigger pockets, and this podcast. So that is those are some considerations. One last consideration, and then Theo, I'm sure you have some thoughts. One last consideration is if you're doing a riskier deal, and by riskier it could be it's a distressed deal, or it's in a D area, or there's a lot of CapEx that needs to be put into the deal, or you're doing some sort of development, for sure would qualify as a riskier deal. If you're doing that, what I've seen developers do is have a higher preferred return in their deal. So instead of our 8% that we offer, I've seen developers offer up to 12% preferred return. And on the surface, when I first got started, because I saw this before I had even done one deal, I was thinking, how the heck are they able to pay 12% whenever they're developing something? They don't even have something that cash flows. Well, the answer is they're not paying 12% during the development or the lease up. They're paying 12% once the property is leased up and stabilized. And so that 12% a year on the preferred return, that's simply accruing until a later date. So it's rewarding the investors, the limited partners, for participating in the first couple years during the development and the lease up stage, because they didn't get any money during those years on their money, or didn't get a return on their money. But then during the stabilization part, then they're getting that 12% has accrued, and now they're getting a chunk of profits as a result of it, assuming everything's gone according to plan.
Oh yeah, that was all really good information. Those two considerations that you mentioned about the profit split, and saying how, if you're looking at a deal and you plug in your typical profit split of, you do at your 8% preferred return, you plug in 70-30, and let's say the IRR is 12% to the limited partners. Like, well, that's not enough. So then you go 75-25, well, still not enough. 80-20, 80. Then finally you get to 90-10, and it makes sense. Like, all right, I got the perfect deal. But as you mentioned, there's going to be obviously there are profit margins, because the only thing that you're really changing is that structure. So the actual cash flow that's coming in is really never going to change. And at the same time, some people might think, well, I'm giving them more money, so they're going to be more likely to, I'm giving them a larger percent of this deal, so they're more likely to invest. Whereas some investors might be thinking the exact opposite, where it's, well, they don't really have as much skin in the game. If it doesn't perform very well, they're only missing out on 10% of the profits, as opposed to 30% of the profits. So I just never thought about it in the other direction. I always thought that would be a positive. And I know people, syndicators will do similar things with some of the other ways they get paid. Like, for example, they either won't take an acquisition fee on their first deal, or they'll just take half, like 1% as opposed to 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it could on one hand, it could sound like it makes sense because you're not taking as much money, but on the other hand, you're not having as much skin in the game as well. And the second thing I wanted to mention, because Stephen did ask a question about the refinance, which you essentially answered. He wanted to know, does Ashcroft keep capital, keep investors in the deal after refinancing and paying them back their initial capital? And if so, does the equity split change at that point? And he mentioned that the refinance does not change their ownership share. Does that mean that, for example, if I invest $100,000 and I'm making that 8% pref each year, so not eight grand, and then after 2 years you return 50% of my equity, so now I only have $50,000 in the deal, I continue to make that 8% on the initial $100,000, right?
Technically, you're making, since you've received half of that already, half of the 100, technically, according to our legal documents, you'd be making the 8% pref on the 50,000, so the balance. Okay. However, for all of our deals to date, we've continued to pay on the original 100 in your example. So we clearly have it written in the contract and the documents that, hey, as your capital account decreases, then your preferred return is paid off of that amount. But because we've been doing a pretty good job on the execution of these deals, we've been able to pay off of the original amount and just kept on trucking.
Yep. And I guess the point of that is I want to make a distinction between things that are return on capital and things that are return of capital, because return of capital reduces that capital account. So that refinance would be a return of capital, whereas a preferred return is a return on capital, and is not, every year when you're making that 8%, your capital account isn't going down; it's staying the same. So
that all depends on how the legal documents are structured. So you'll that at that point, or at this point, we're getting into the nitty gritty aspects, which can vary from syndicator to syndicator. So you'll just want to talk to your attorney if you're a GP, or you'll want to just read through it as an LP and see how that works.
Okay, Steven's last question was in regard to the length of the investment. So he asked, what's your experience with how fast investors are generally looking to get their money back? 3 to 5 years, 10 years?
Get their money back. So I assume I'm interpreting that as how long do investors want to tie up their
Mm-hmm.
cash in a deal? And there's no magic number there. I mean, all of our deals except for one have been a 5-year projected hold. One's been a 7, but that's where we land, or at least to date. That might change in the future. I think I would say that any investor who's not looking to invest in a project that's a 5-year or longer projection, they're likely not an apartment syndication investor.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd say the minimum's 5 years, and that's where we're at. And then, I've interviewed people on the show who have 10-year projections, 15-year projections, or 7-year. It just varies.
Okay. So those are the answers to your question, Stephen. As Jim mentioned in the beginning, it varies from syndicator to syndicator, and it's most of these things are completely negotiable. We do have the syndication school series, where we just released a couple of weeks ago a series on how to structure LP and GP compensation. So we gave a lot more examples of different types of equity, profit splits, preferred returns, kind of what to think about when you're setting up these structures with your limited partners. And so that's going to be series number 10. And you can check those out at syndicationschool.com. And then for a little bit more information on raising capital from passive investors, we've also got an 8-part series, series number 9, that's also at syndicationschool.com. So moving on to some updates, I got one thing that I wanted to mention that I did have a chance to mention last week, and that has to do with off-market deals. So one of the ways to obviously find off-market deals are through broker relationships, which, as I've talked about and as Joe's talked about, takes time to build. You're not going to call a broker on the phone one day and he's going to send you an off-market deal the next day. And so we gave some tips on how to win over a broker, which included, paying them a consulting fee. That included, constant follow-up. And one of those things involved getting a list of all the recent sales, visiting them in person. And that's why I talked about how I did that. And so I essentially followed all those 4 ways to a T. And sure enough, and I did this with about 6 brokers over the past 3-4 months, and one of them called me a couple weeks ago out of the blue. It's totally unexpected, and had an off-market deal that they were going to list in a couple. And they were going to list eventually, but they wanted to see if I was interested in it first. It was in Jacksonville, which isn't our market. And I mentioned that we're not investing in Jacksonville right now. But if you have any deals like this in Tampa, definitely feel free to reach out. And we also kind of talked about maybe playing some golf later this year. But I guess the reason I wanted to bring that up is it's just kind of shows that those four strategies work, because I wasn't expecting to have any broker come remotely close to sending me an off-market deal until I'd actually done a deal with that person. Mm-hmm. But sure enough, there are ways to kind of expedite that process, and those 4 ways, which are consulting fee, constantly following up, going to their recent sales comps, and letting them know how that relates to your investment strategy. And the 4th one was telling them how you're funding your deals, so debt and equity. I just wanted to kind of mention that. So if anyone's out there, just starting out, wants to increase their chances of receiving an off-market deal from a broker, if you implement those 4 steps for all the brokers you talk to, hopefully within a couple of months, one of them will potentially send you an off-market deal.
Why'd you pass on it?
Just because it wasn't in our market, and we're focusing exclusively in Tampa right now. But we do have a plan to expand out to places like Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Orlando in June if we can't find a deal in Tampa.
Why wait till June when you have an off-market deal right now?
just because we have everything, all of our pieces in place in Tampa, and really none anywhere else. So before we start looking at deals in any other market, we want to make sure that we have a proper management company in place first. That's really the only reason why.
You could probably find a property management company within 2-3 weeks, and I imagine it's going to take you at least that period of time to qualify the deal and put it under contract.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll hit him back up and get the information and see if it'll make sense.
I mean, yeah.
Why not?
Bird in the hand's better than two in the bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're in Florida. I mean, how far away is Jacksonville from Tampa?
I'm not sure. Like maybe 4 or 5 hours.
Oh, all right. So it's like from Fort Worth to Lubbock, Texas.
I think it's about 4. I think it's in northern Florida.
Like 300 miles or so.
Yeah, again, this is just our thought process, and I'm not saying it's right at all. But we really wanted to do a deal that was within driving distance of us for our first deal. I know you didn't do that. I guess you did, but we just wanted our first deal to be within driving distance. That way, we could consistently go to the property without it being a massive headache. While we're actually underwriting the deals, I really like to visit the properties first, and it had been very difficult to continuously drive 4 or 5 hours every weekend to a place. But now that you're mentioning it, it is just one deal, and it was off market. So he called me like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and typically these things take a while to move. So I'll send him an email today and kind of to see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, 4-hour drive, not ideal, but doable, and you're still within striking distance. And if it's a 4-hour drive, then it's going to be about a 30-minute flight. And so you could always do that too. Okay, yeah, I think we're probably all interested in that. I would jump on. I mean, I have no idea about the deal, but if you qualify, if Jacksonville works for you as a market, in my opinion, you got an off-market deal. That's the holy grail. Go jump on
Yeah.
it. Okay. Well, so any other updates?
No, that's the only thing I wanted to mention.
Okay. Are you glad you mentioned it now that I mentioned? Are you
I mean, I am glad because in my mind, I was just completely opposed to investing outside of Tampa. But you made really good points.
Yeah. I mean, you've been preparing for this, and so you just got to update the plan slightly, if assuming that the market and the deal qualifies, and you can make it happen. It's not like it's in Seattle, Washington, or something like that. Okay. One thing I wanted to mention is first props to Grant. He's our social media guy and also helps with events and some other things. We had 84 people at the Cincinnati meetup earlier this week. And I do a monthly meetup. 84 people, and it's largely because of Grant. I've been doing this meetup for about 3 years, every month. And it had about 20 to 30 people for the first 2 years. And then, it has grown tremendously. And this month, it was the most we've ever had, 84 people. And I'm bringing that up because I was looking this morning on my desktop, and I was organizing my folders from the last 7-8 years. I've just archiving stuff so I can be more organized and I don't have to search through things that I don't ever look at now and just archive them. And one document I saw from September 23rd, 2012, and it was titled "Why I Failed Tonight." Why I Failed Tonight. And I immediately knew what I wrote about. And I thought, how relevant is this, and how cool is it that this is where I came from, and this is where I'm at now. The 84 people at the meetup every month now, at least. And what happened on September the 23rd, 2012, is this was my second, maybe my first. It might have been my first class that I taught on how to buy single family homes. I was living in New York City. So New York City I had my advertising job, and I had bought 3 or 4 single family homes by this time, and I was had told some friends about what I was doing, and they're like, "Oh, you're buying these single family homes, these 3 or 4 in Texas, and you have this advertising job. How are you doing it?" And so I taught a class, and so I set up this class, and it was in the upstairs of some church on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And I probably got the church space for like $20 or $25, and to attend the class, it was probably $8-9 to attend the class. And um, it was upstairs, and I was so nervous, so nervous, because I had 3 or 4 people attending. So I actually know it wasn't my first one, because my first one didn't. I think I had 1 person attend. So this was probably my second or third time. And we grew out of the first space apparently into this space where it had a table that sat 6 people. And so I arrived early at the church, went upstairs, and it's like their little like old. They use it as a daycare, but I was going to teach this class on how to buy single family homes in a market that makes cash flow. So in my case, Dallas Fort Worth. Well, had 4 or 5 people come in the door, and they sat down, and I'm just sweating bullets. I'm so nervous. I am terrified of public speaking, and I I like get up. I'm like pacing in front of them, and then I sit down, and I try to talk, and nothing comes out. And it's just nerve-wracking. And the first slide's up, and I'm not saying anything. And then I start to say something, and voice starts cracking. And some of these people are coworkers of mine, and so I'm worried about them judging me, and this, snowballing. It's not like they're strangers, and me looking like an idiot, and I'm like crashing quickly. So I get up, I get a drink of water, just it's silence, and it's just me like getting up, getting a drink of water. I sit back down, and I ask some questions to like break the ice, warm me up. And it's so awkward because I've already said hi to them, I know them, but now I'm like sitting down, I'm asking them questions. And eventually, once they answer some questions, I like get into the presentation, and I power through it. And then I they leave. And I'm walking home just pissed off, embarrassed, mortified actually. And so I get home, and I do an assessment, and I write down, and I title the document "Why I Failed Tonight." And I wrote, "I didn't talk to anyone this entire day, and when I started tonight, it showed." Must have been a Saturday or something. "When I started tonight, it showed. I have to go in with an aggressive attitude during presentations. I can't go in being cold. I need to bring energy, passion, and I didn't have it today. I also need to do icebreakers to learn more about the class and what they want to learn from it." And then in this document, I have another entry, which is a month later, so October 10th, 2012. And this is a presentation I did for the advertising agency I was working at. And I did better. And I have in here, "I told myself I was prepared, and a calmness came over me. I knew I would do well and perform, use my energy for the good." And then I have a entry 2 years later. So this is June 20th, 2014. And I have, "I now know to simply serve the audience. Go in with a mentality of helping them. All else fades to black, and when that is the focus." And that is the approach I take today. And it's so refreshing. It's so much easier whenever the focus is simply on serving the audience, serving people who are there. And a recommendation I have is search Tony Robbins presentation tips on YouTube. His video, which is from the 80s, he's in a tank top, and he's got a funny hairdo, and it's some weird colors because it was filmed on who knows what in the 80s. That presentation helped me learn how to be an effective public speaker. and it put my mind in the right place. And I'm mentioning all this because, now today, 6 years later, we got a packed house of 84 people. And by the way, of those 84, 2 of them came from Tennessee, which was effectively the same distance from Tampa to Jacksonville, Theo, or if you're Texas people, from Lubbock, Texas to Fort Worth. That's how far they came for this 2-hour meetup. One person came from Cleveland. I don't know the different distance to Cincinnati from Cleveland, but it's similar to what I just mentioned. Another couple came from Dayton. A couple more came from Indianapolis, which is probably a couple hours away, I believe, from Cincinnati. And then the rest came from Cincinnati. So we're attracting people from all over, and it's growing. And it's from the consistency and that we're doing, and then also from this approach. So I just wanted to mention it because, not all for me is sunshine and rainbows, and it's an evolution, and it's just sticking to it and just doing things consistently over a long period of time. And those are some things that I thought would be interesting to just point out.
No, yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that story. I'm sure everyone listening can relate in some form to your story about your presentation at your presentation attempt for when you're doing the single family house teaching. I remember when we first started doing these, I'd be like blacked out the entire time. Like it'd end, I'd be like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I said. I hope it didn't sound stupid just because I was so nervous. But obviously for me, it just takes time. I have to do something for, over and over and over again, and just, fail in a sense until I get comfortable doing it. And something else that really helped me too was taking that Dale Carnegie class a few years ago. If you remember that?
Yeah, do remember.
And kind of the biggest thing for me was they made you go up in front of, it's only like 10, 15 people there, but they had this exercise where you just are acting out like the goofiest things ever. Like you completely embarrass yourself. And that whole experience going from, knowing it was happening the week before, being so nervous that entire week, that day practicing, practicing the techniques, and then going into the actual class, doing it, and the energy level was everyone was super anxious and like didn't want to be judged. At the end, everyone was laughing, everyone was having a great time. It was like the most fascinating experience I've ever gone through. Like ever since then, like I've really had no anxiety doing any type of public speaking, whether it be, I consider this public speaking, even though we're not necessarily in front of people, yeah. So I just wanted to kind of mention that too.
And I guarantee you, after you did the Dale Carnegie thing exercise where you had to, do silly stuff, and everyone else, the energy was much, just through the roof after everyone was going, you probably wanted to go again.
So you're allowed to volunteer at the end to go again. I'm like, I want to do this one. I want to do that one.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. It's like when you ride a roller coaster, although I don't like roller coasters. When you ride a roller coaster, for most people, you do it once, you get over the initial fear, and you keep going. And how applicable is that in every aspect of business and real estate investing? There's initial fear, you get through it, you learn from it. It's important to, in my case, I documented why it happened, at least why I thought it happened. And then I just work on continually improving over time while still doing that stuff, so that I'm forcing myself to be in that situation to figure things out.
Yeah, that's great presentation advice.
And if you want to come to our meetup, bestevercincy.com. We do it the last Tuesday of every month. We've had people from Detroit, Michigan, and all over, and I already mentioned the other cities who come. It's a whopping like $2.50 to attend. I do that so that people who RSVP come, and we don't get a bunch of phantom RSVPs, and we have pizza there. So basically you're going to get some pizza for your $2.50 or whatever it is. So bestevercincy.com. Would love to have out of towners as well as obviously all the Cincinnati people.
All right. So any other updates you wanted to mention?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, great. So trivia question of the week. So we do these on every following Friday. And if you submit your answer via email to info@joefairless, or if you submit a comment under the YouTube video with your answer, first person that gets the answer correct will get a free signed copy there's a free signed copy, correct, of the first Best Real Estate Investing Advice Ever, Volume 1.
Yep.
So last week's trivia question was, what city and it had to have a population greater than 200,000, has the largest percentage of renter population? And the answer was Newark, New Jersey, at a whopping 74%.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's part of the MSA of New York City, I imagine. So
this week's question is going to be.
For the record, I did say New York City, didn't I?
Yep, you did. And I believe New York City was the top 5, I told you.
Well, I think Newark, New Jersey is part of the MSA for New York City.
Okay.
So
I'm not 100% sure.
I'm pretty sure that is. So if we're talking MSAs, then I need a pat on the back, please.
Yeah, good work, Joe. We'll see if you get this. See if you get this one. Right. So there's a company out there who does annual rent reviews, and so they track the rents for the previous 3 years and see which what the cities with the greatest increase and what are the cities with the greatest reduction in rent. This week's question is going to be, what U.S. city had the largest percent increase in median rents from 2014 to 2017?
I'm going to go Vegas.
Okay. I actually didn't read through this list, but is Vegas on the list?
It didn't even make the list.
Vegas did not make the list.
Oh, dang it. Whatever.
I'm gonna it's just Vegas did not make the list, although there is.
How long is the list?
It's just top 10.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, clearly I was way off. That's my guess.
I was very surprised by the answer to this one.
All right. So I was thinking Vegas or like Boise, Idaho or something, but all right, fine. But I'm sticking with Vegas, and clearly that's off. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the answer next week.
Or once we no longer live, I'll tell you the answer.
Okay.
And then a few more things. So Best Ever Conference is at the end of February. So we're about 3 weeks out now. That's in Denver, Colorado. Tickets are still available. So go to besteverconference.com to pick up your ticket now, because ticket prices will continue to go up each week. Every following Friday, we mention one of what to expect at the conference, and one of the panels is going to focus on the ins and outs of professional underwriting and due diligence. So there'll be a panel of active apartment syndicators, apartment investors, and they will discuss, from their perspective, the best practices when underwriting the deal. So once you find the deal and financially evaluating it, and then how to kind of continue to evaluate that deal after placing it under contract during the due diligence period. So very important stuff for apartments, because obviously if you don't know how to underwrite and don't know how to do due diligence, you're either not going to find a deal that makes sense, or you're going to buy a deal that you shouldn't buy. So that's going to be a very powerful panel. And
on the opposite end of that spectrum, Friday night, we're having a party. So everyone who's attending the conference, we got a private party that we're going to be doing, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So learn underwriting, and then let's go party.
Party it up. I like it. And then lastly, before we wrap up, make sure you guys buy the Best Ever Apartment Syndication book on
Guys
Amazon.
And girls, Theo.
Guys and girls. I've gotten
last week you said guys, and I didn't say girls too, but I was thinking it.
I'll get it eventually. I need to put a note back in my outline.
Real quick, by the way, last week, did you ever end up saying imagine this? You said you're going to slip it into the episode.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Or imagine this. I wake up, I go on Bigger Pockets to post for the day, and I get, every day I get at least one person who sent me a message about the book, and how much either that they bought it and they're going to read it, or that they have read it and how much value it added. So I just really appreciate it. I'm really glad that the book is adding so much value to people's businesses. As you guys know, we read the review of the week on the Guys and Girls. We read the review of the week on the podcast. This week's review comes from Steve as well. So that's why I was on the guys in my mind.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I purchased multiple books on apartment syndication. If you're on the fence about which one to buy, I can guarantee this one is the best. The reason why I was hesitant to buy it initially was because there is not an option to listen to it on Audible. You need to take the time and read this. Joe goes into plenty of detail on where to find private investors, what types of deals to buy, what to look for in cities if you're investing out of state, and how to answer common questions that people are going to ask you that will probably stump you. This book gets a 10 out of 5 stars.
Thank you for that. And by the way, Stephen and all of Best Ever listeners who like the audio stuff, which I imagine you do since you're listening to a podcast right now, we are in the final stages of having the audio version of the Best Ever Apartment Syndication book recorded. So we are going to have an audio version of the book, and it's going to be out within 40 days from today. So you can just go on Amazon and check it out within 40 days from when this episode airs at the latest. Cool. All right. Well, is that it, Theo? We good?
That's it. We're good.
All right. Well, Best Ever listeners, thanks so much for hanging out with us. Hopefully we added value to your day and your business and your real estate ventures, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.